From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Ms. Viorst has written poetry and novels for children, teens, and adults, but she is best known for Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, a picture book that is a treasure to millions of children and their parents. Well, let's clap for that. I grew up with it. The book taught us that even on the worst days, especially a day when you had to eat lima beans, yuck, could always get better at the end, and tomorrow would be even better. Alexander returns in her latest book, Alexander, who's trying his best to be the best boy ever. This time he finds out that being the best boy ever can be very boring. With his patience wearing down, Alexander may just decide to be a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad boy. I can't help but mention how magical it is to be present with an author I loved so very much when I was just a wee little boy. And I know you'll love listening to her as much as I will. So without further ado, let's bring her on stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I love those introductions. I just don't know why I can't hear it a second time before I speak. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here again. These book festivals are so wonderful. I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you. I've got a plan. I'm going to start by interviewing myself, by asking myself some questions I'm asked a lot. As part of my answers, I'll tell you about and read you a few parts of 2 new children's books, and then I'll give you boys and girls, and maybe some grown-ups, a chance to raise your hand and ask me questions. Is that okay with everyone? Good. Okay. First question. So, Mrs. Viorst, how did you get to be a published writer? With great difficulty. I started writing all the way back when I was 7 years old. Since 2nd grade, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to take all my feelings in here and all my ideas up here and put them down in different ways on paper. So I started writing poems and writing them down with a sharpened pencil in my best printing, and I sent them, sure that they were masterpieces and were going to be published, to the magazines my mom read every month. But all I got back were rejections, enough to at least fill this room. And though I kept writing and sending them back for what felt like a million years, I didn't get to have not one single word published until I was way, way, way over 30. That was when some editor finally decided to publish the poems I've been writing for, did I say a billion years. Second question, where do you get your ideas? I get my ideas from everywhere. I still write what's in here and what's up here, and I still remember what it feels like to be a kid. What helped me remember first was my own 3 sons. That's Anthony and Nick and Alexander, 3 real boys, who are now all grown up with children of their own. And now what helps me remember are their children, my 7 grandchildren, Miranda and Bryce in Denver, and Benjamin and Nathaniel from New York, and Alexander and Marla's 3 sons who live right near me, Olivia and Isaac and Toby. But back when my kids were kids, they were the kids I first wrote books for and wrote books about. And if the kids in my books weren't honeys and angels and darlings and little sweetie pies, that's because angels and darlings and sweetie pies were definitely not my kids. No. My boys weren't neat or always polite or always well-behaved. They were loud, very loud, and also sloppy. They bled a lot. They spilled a lot of things. They fought. They got into trouble. They acted real silly. And when they wanted to whisper a special secret in my ear, it wasn't, "I love you, Mommy." It was, "Joel down the street has stinky feet." No, they weren't the most perfect little people in the world. They were kids. And from them, I got ideas about monsters and getting into trouble and terrible days and moms who make mistakes. Seriously, do moms ever make mistakes? I'm hearing no from the moms. How about kids? Kids, do moms ever make mistakes? Okay, I thought so. Anyway, that's where I got my ideas, from my kids and my kids' kids and the little kid who still lives inside of me. Third question. Mrs. Viorst, you write lots and lots of books for kids, but you also write books for grown-ups, too. Isn't it confusing to keep switching back and forth from kids to grown-ups? The answer is actually it's not that hard at all, because what I have found out is that all of us, little people and big people, share many, many, many of the same feelings and are interested in many of the same things. And these are the things and feelings I like to write about, both for kids and grown-ups. For instance, grown-ups sometimes worry. Kids, do kids sometimes worry? Yeah, I think so. We all worry sometimes. I worry, you worry, we all do. So I just wrote this new children's book about a kid who, it's called And Two Boys Booed. It's about a kid who is going to sing a song at a talent show. He was going to sing his song in front of his class at the school talent show, and he didn't think he was one bit scared or worried. In fact, he was sure he wasn't because, as he explained, I had practiced 1 billion times, plus I was wearing my lucky blue boots and my pants with cool pockets. Aren't these great boots? And these are wonderful illustrations with flaps, so look, you can see what's in the pockets. Anyway, he was sure he wasn't worried. But then the talent show begins, and 5 other kids in the class are going before him. And after Chloe reads her poem, and after Henry walks on his hands, and after Georgia dances and Leo juggles some balls, there is only one kid left, and then it is going to be his turn to get up there in front of the class and sing. And here he is, but you're going to have trouble seeing him because he is so scared that he is hiding in his shirt. Can anybody see him at all? He's the little one in the striped shirt. In each picture, he hides more and more until by the end, you can't even see his face anymore. Well, after the last kid, Madeline, shows everyone the picture she has painted, it's now, with everyone looking at him and waiting, it's now his turn to get up and sing a song. Well, he gets up, he sits down, he gets up, he sits down, and then he keeps sitting down because he's way too worried, too scared to sing a song. And that's when 2 boys in his class, 2 not-so-nice boys, well, they boo. Boo, boo, which makes him even more worried and scared and upset and confused and mixed up. And I'm not going to tell you what happens after that. I'm only saying that this was one very scared, very worried boy, and I'm saying that even grown-ups can feel this way too. I mean, just because I'm standing right here at this moment talking to you doesn't mean that I never used to worry that maybe I'd stand up and open my mouth and no words would come out. Or I'd get up in front of you and I'd say, "Hi, my name is Judith. What is my own last name?" Well, I don't worry like that anymore, but I certainly used to. Now, in addition to worried grown-ups and kids, most everyone in the world sometimes feel mad or sad or glad, even silly. Anyone in this room ever feel mad or glad or silly, kids? Yeah, happens. Me too. So I write about those feelings for everybody, little people and big ones. And I'll tell you another thing. All of us kids and all of us grown-ups, sometimes we'll have some not nice thoughts, even about our very own brothers and sisters. Maybe especially about our very own brothers and sisters. Now, brothers and sisters love each other, but sometimes they also seriously annoy each other. And sometimes when a brother or sister is getting on our nerves, we might even wish that they'd fall in a hole. Does anyone here have an annoying brother or sister? Okay, now here's a harder question. Has anyone here ever been an annoying brother or sister? Come on, admit it, admit it. Okay, you can do it too. Well, I've written a lot about that. And I've also written about embarrassing moments, like stepping in the dog poop at a birthday party. Because embarrassing moments happen to everyone, because it seems we're never too old finally stop doing and saying some really dumb things. I also write about people having bad days. Now, sometimes you'll hear a grown-up say, I slipped on the ice, I spilled some soup on my shirt, I can't find my glasses, I also can't find my keys. Everything's wrong, nothing is right, and I am having a really, really bad day. So I've written about the bad days that happen to grown-ups, but certainly boys and girls have bad days too, which is why I wrote this first book for my own son, Alexander, who just had so many bad days. This is a kid, if he sat on a chair, the way some of you are sitting on the chair, he'd be wiggling so much he'd slip and fall and get a knee injury. Not playing soccer, just sitting. So for him, I wrote a book called Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Now, if you remember in this book, some of you who have read it, that Alexander is so unhappy with his terrible day that he keeps on saying he's going to move to Australia. Except, as his mom explains at the end of this book, bad days happen in Australia too. Now, ever since I wrote this book, people have wanted to make a movie about it. And finally, after a whole lot of trying, they have. It's coming out in October, and it's made by Disney, which makes lots of nice movies. And it's a live-action film that is called exactly like the book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I could look at that on the screen for a really long time. Now, in the movie, they found a special new kid named Ed Oxenbould, who's playing Alexander, and a really good-looking actress playing me, Jennifer Gardner. And the dad is this very funny actor named Steve Carell, who was once in a movie called Despicable Me, actually Despicable Me 1 and 2, which I've seen, both of them. I don't think he's going to look like this in the actual live movie. So he's playing Alexander's dad, and there is even a surprise, delicious appearance by Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins, though he's not playing Chim Chimney in that. Anyway, it's a very cute movie. I took my whole family to see it. We all went crazy at the screening. I hope you guys will go and see it too, but back to the book. After I wrote my first Alexander, boys and girls kept sending me lots of letters, funny letters and some sad ones too, about their own terrible, horrible, awful days. I also got letters that boys and girls wanted me to give to Alexander, letters with interesting pictures and lots of advice for him. So I'm going to read you just some of the letters. Dear Alex, get used to the bubble gum. I had to use a vacuum to get gum out of my hair. And please don't move to Australia. They have way badder days. Signed, Justin. P.S. You rock. And here's a sad one. Dear Alexander, for me, every day is a bad day. Regards, Sam. Dear Alexander, next time you have a bad day, don't let things bother you so much. Colleen, P.S. What is your favorite color? Alexander, I know how you feel, but cheer up. Everybody has bad days, even me. Signed, Hannah. Dear Alexander, I get pushed in the mud all the time. Don't get upset, Erica. And maybe my favorite of the letters said, Dear Alexander, whenever you have a bad day, blame your brothers. A lot of kids wrote in their letters that they really liked to read about Alexander, and could I please write some more stories about him? So I wrote a second Alexander called Alexander Used to Be Rich Last Sunday, and then I waited a very, very long time. And then I wrote a third book called Alexander, who's not, do you hear me? I mean it, going to move, and I waited a really long time. And now I have just written, after an incredibly long time, this brand new number 4 Alexander book. This is the one that's called Alexander, who's trying his best to be the best boy ever, and I'm going to read you parts of it and tell you parts of it right now. Here is how it starts, and this is Alexander telling the story, and he is as grumpy and crabby as ever. Last night, somebody ate a whole box of jelly donuts and hid the empty donut box under the couch. I'm not saying who that somebody is, but this morning, when I woke up, I had a bellyache. The good news is I get to stay home from school. The not so good news is it's Saturday. There's no school. The other not so good news is that my mom found the empty donut box under the couch, and she's back in my room, and she's shaking her finger at me, and she's got her serious face on, and she's saying seriously, there are going to be consequences. Consequences are what you get when you do what you shouldn't have done. I hate consequences. What kind of fool eats a whole box of donuts, my brother Nick is asking me. I'm not answering. What kind of fool hides a donut box under the couch, my brother Anthony is asking me. I'm not answering. My mom says that my consequences are staying all day in my room with no video games or watching stuff on TV. Even though I'm thinking that video games and watching TV might really help make a bellyache get better. Well, Alexander gets his punishment. He is in his room, and his father takes Nick and Anthony for a nice long bike ride, and his mom ignores him and takes a nice long bath. And everyone but Alexander is having a great time while he is thinking about the donuts he ate and his bellyache and his consequences. He's thinking how much he liked those jelly donuts, and he's thinking how much he hates his consequences. And after a while, he decides that he hates consequences much, 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 much more than he likes donuts. And after that, he makes this huge decision that he will never, ever have consequences again. Because starting today, he'll only do good things. Because starting today, he'll never, ever, ever get into trouble again. Because starting today, he is going to try to be the best boy ever for the complete and entire rest of his life. Lots of luck with that plan. Well, he does try. I mean, he gets up on Sunday morning, and he's walking around on tiptoes. Everyone's asleep, but he's not making noise. He's not bouncing his ball, even though he'd like to see whether he could bounce it more times than Anthony. He's getting bored, he's getting lonely, and he's thinking he could go outside and ring the doorbell, and then there wouldn't be an empty house anymore, especially if he rang it a lot. But he doesn't do that because he's trying to be the best boy ever. When he goes to school, he remembers to bring his homework. He doesn't talk to his friend. He keeps his mouth shut. He raises his hand all the time, even though he doesn't know the answer, driving Miss Klimp, his teacher, kind of crazy. And when she says, Alexander, what's going on with you? He says, I'm trying to be the best boy ever. On Tuesday, in the soccer game, nobody lets him ever have a chance at the ball, but he doesn't scream no fair at the top of his lungs. And when he gets on the school bus and Maisie can't find her glasses, he helps her look for them. And on Thursday, he goes to Shelley's Music Shack, where he and his mom take guitar lessons, and he's thinking he's a rock star, and he's hopping and jumping around and having a good time. And he's not hearing them say, stop it, Alexander. And by the time he hears them say, stop it, Alexander, he has totally wrecked Shelley's Music Shack. On Friday, he looks for Maisie's glasses yet again, though he's getting a little annoyed, and he thinks about telling her, why don't you just scotch tape them to your face? But he doesn't say that because he's trying to be the best boy ever. On Saturday morning, a week has gone by. Alexander is lying in bed. He's actually done it. He has actually done it. But he's thinking that trying to be the best boy ever is hard, and that trying to be the best boy ever for the complete and entire rest of his life is a really, really long time, and he's thinking, for the rest of my life, I won't get into trouble. For the rest of my life, I'll only do nice things. No clonking, no poking, no bouncing on beds, no messing up music shacks, no waking up people with doorbell rings. For the rest of my life, I'll be looking for Maisie's lost glasses, making sure the backs of my teeth are clean. No yelling, no fair, no matter how no fair they're being, no wishing that bad stuff would happen to brothers when they're mean. Just thinking about how hard it will be, I'm getting the kind of bellyache I got when I ate that whole box of jelly donuts. And I'm thinking I'd much, much rather get a bellyache from donuts than a bellyache from being the best boy ever. That is not the end, but again, I'm not going to tell you what the end is. I have a couple of questions to ask you guys, and then I'm going to let you ask me questions. And I hope that the kids will answer this. Do you think Alexander will keep trying to be the best boy ever for the rest of his life? What do you think? No? Do you think being good all the time is too hard to be? It's what? It's not that hard? You could be the best girl ever for the entire rest of your life? No? Okay. All right. Do you think every kid has to get into some kind of trouble some of the time? Yeah, me too. I agree with that. Not big trouble, but a little trouble. Okay, it's now your turn to raise your hand and ask me questions about the Alexander story, about the Two Boys Boots story, about the pictures in all my books, anything you want. I'm not talking about my age or my weight. Yes. The first poem I ever wrote was a poem about my mom and my dad dying, but they hadn't died. I just thought it would make a really interesting poem. They didn't think it was that interesting. Any other questions? Should we let the grown-ups? Okay.
Are all the Alexander books about Alexander, or are they kind of an amalgam about all three of your boys?
Well, the three characters in the Alexander book are Alexander and his two brothers. In actual life, there is an Anthony and Nick and an Alexander. But each character is an amalgam of my actual kids and a lot of other people's kids, and even the little kid in me. It's like a kaleidoscope. You take a lot of pieces and you put them in and you shake them up, and you get a somewhat different pattern. Yes, back there.
My granddaughter and I have just finished, the third Lulu book. Are you writing any more? We need more chapter books for girls like that.
The lady in the back asked me about my Lulu books. I've written 3 Lulu books. Lulu has become practically my favorite character in the world because she is a seriously bratty little girl who has temper tantrums and wants what she wants when she wants it, and gets into all kinds of trouble, drives people totally crazy. In the first book, Lulu and the Brontosaurus, she wanted a Brontosaurus for a birthday present, which other people might agree is a little unreasonable, but not Lulu. In the second one, she tries to earn money by walking 3 dogs, except she is a disaster as a dog walker. And in the third one, she is being babysat by Sonia Sophia Solinsky, the toughest babysitter you ever met in your life. So I thought I was done with Lulu, but she's bothering me. She comes at me at night, and after just finishing spending a week with my 2 grandsons who were at each other's throats for most of the week, they were starting to inspire me about a 4th Lulu book, but I won't go into details. Yes. You with the blue, well, you. Do I know any book writers? Yes, I know a lot of book writers. Writers hang out with book writers, and first of all, I'm married to a book writer. He writes grown-up books about the Middle East, And just when my grandchildren get too old to be hearing my stories, he's going to come in and explain how to make peace in the Middle East. I have a lot of other friends who write children's books. One of my best friends in the world for children's books was a woman named Elaine Konigsberg, E.L. Konigsberg, who wrote From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil P. Frankweiler and a lot of other wonderful books. And I was at a book conference a few weeks ago, and I met the sensational, glorious Judy Blume. Yes.
Why are all the Alexander pictures in black and white?
Well, actually, the last two books we have colorized just the kid. I love black and white books. Publishers get very nervous if they're all black and white now because kids are so used to color. I think black and white asks kids to use their imagination more and summon up whatever they want to summon up. This partial use of color in my last two Alexander books is wonderful, though. I love that. I think it was a genius idea, not mine. Yes? Well, the illustrator for the first two Alexander books was a very dear man named Ray Cruz from New York. And Ray ran into trouble with his hands, and two other artists really channeled Ray Cruz. This is not Ray Cruz, and it is a man named Isidre Moniz. And the one before that was illustrated by Robin Price Glasser, who is the one who did all the Fancy Nancy books. And she just gave up her whole personal statement and made the art look like Ray Cruz. I met Ray Cruz once, and we have been pen pals for about 25 years. We write to each other about old movies and how hard the 21st century is for those old people.
You probably get this question a lot, but do you have any advice for any young writers?
I sure do. Advice for young writers. I think you have to take yourself seriously as a writer. If you really want to be a writer, that means you write every day. You can decide how much time you want to put into it, whether you want to write for 10 minutes every day or an hour every day or half an hour every day. But you write, you finish what you've written, you rewrite. Sometimes I think I'm not a writer, I'm a rewriter. And you also really, really need to read. It is only with reading that you learn all the ways you can tell a story, all the ways you can describe a character, all the things you are allowed to write about, which is everything.
Thank you.
Yes? What do my sons think of the Alexander books? My sons have started out, when I wrote the first Alexander book, and I read it to Alexander in manuscript form, I thought he was going to be crazy about it. He got so mad at me. He got furious. He said, "Why are you giving me this bad day? Give it to Nick. Give it to Tony. Why me?" And he was carrying on like a total maniac, 4 years old. And so I said, "You know, honey, it's just in manuscript form. It isn't a book yet. So we could call it Walter in the Terrible Horrible or Stanley in the Terrible Horrible." And then in my total manipulative mommy mode, I said, "But of course your name won't appear in great big letters on the front of the book." He decided to keep it Alexander. Anything else? Yeah. You like my book? Thank you. I like hearing that very, very much. How are we on time? Okay.
How long did it take you to write the Alexander book?
You know, it's a 32-page picture book, and it took a really long time. Because what you do is you have an idea of what you want to write, which is about. I got very interested in the idea of a bad day, because grown-ups use the concept as a container concept. You know, you say, I'm having a bad day, and it's got limits, it's got boundaries. It starts here, it's going to end here. So I was in love with the idea, because I would say that to my kids, you're having a bad day, which meant, you know, it's going to go away. But once I got that idea, then spelling out what that bad day was going to consist of, you know, what things were really true to kids' experiences and feelings, that can take a long time. Many months to write the Alexander book, and the longer books a lot longer than that. I mean, on one grown-up book of mine, I spent 3 years working every day.
I have a question
Yes.
over here.
Okay, the lights are making it impossible for me to see. Yeah, go ahead.
You have a real gift for writing for kids and for adults, and as an adult, I enjoy your books for kids. How do you, what are your writing habits? How do you divide your time between projects more for adults and more for all ages?
I think that an idea bubbles up in me, I mean, with the children's books, I got hooked on writing 3 in a row. I wrote the Two Boys Food book. I wrote the Best Boy Ever book, and I just finished a 3rd book of children's poems. So I did 3 in a row. But while I was writing the children's poems, I started thinking I need to write poems for adults again, and so I started doing that. And now I'm thinking about going back to children's books because of this Lulu who will not leave me alone. Yes?
What was your motivation for pushing through the rejection years?
What was my motivation for pushing through the rejections? Well, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds sort of corny or pretentious. I couldn't not write. I had to be a writer. I had to write. And, when people say they wish they were a writer, well, if you write, you're a writer. You want to be a published writer, that's a whole other story. And I still have 10 minutes? Oh, okay. Are there any more questions?
Right by the back doors. One.
What? Yeah. You have to help me because I really cannot see anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. When are you going to write some more books on the vicissitudes of old age for women?
Funny you should mention that. The vicissitudes of old age for women. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm writing a book called Wait for Me, and other poems about the irritations and consolations of a long marriage. It covers a lot of ground.
We have a question.
Yes.
What's your favorite book you wrote in?
That, she asked me what's my favorite book. And people ask me that all the time. So here's the problem. It's like asking me, who's your favorite child? Which of your sons do you like the best? Which of your grandchildren do you like the best? I can't pick. I like them all. Some days are better than others. Well, Alexander isn't the only one who loves and overeats on jelly donuts. I shall say no more.
And recently, how is it when you are 80 years old? I'm 80 now. So how is it about more than 80 years old?
Well, that's what this new book is sort of in between. I'm only 83 and a half, so I have a while to go before I get to be 90. And so I'm holding off on the 90 book till I know a little bit more about that. But meanwhile, I'm writing this intermediate poetry book. But I'll get there. Don't go away.
I've got a question
Wait, I think somebody else.
over here.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I started reading you, Ms. Viorst, when I was a young college student in the early 70s, when you were writing a column for Red Book magazine.
Right.
And have appreciated so much your children's books and your books for adults. And I tend to think of you as one of the wise women in our culture. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about where some of that wisdom comes from. Were there women who guided you? Were there circumstances that guided you? Can you share a little bit of that?
That's a very beautiful and touching question. The first thing I'm going to do is go home and tell my husband and my children that I have been authenticated as wise. But I think practically everything that I have learned is in human relationships. I have a wonderful, wonderful, beloved group of women friends. And we walk and we talk. And as Alexander says, you talk a lot faster than you walk, Mom, which is true. But over the years, these women, we have sort of tried to figure out everything that goes on. I mean, I have a poem, an adult poem about talking about everything from eyeliner to the meaning of the universe. And I do mean that. That's what we talk about. And we try to figure out life that way. Certainly, books help. Books have been a huge, huge part, and particularly poetry. I belong to a 8-woman poetry group for 30 years. And we've had 6 months to live. I would give up a lot of stuff, but not my poetry group. We take turns being the teacher, and we read the poems, and we try to understand them. How many people does it take to understand a poem? 8 women listening very carefully and respectfully to each other. So my poetry book, my women friends, the other books I read, and virtually everything I bump into in my life. Eventually, I mean, I will start out screaming and crying and moaning about a lot of things that eventually I can use to understand life better. One more question? Okay, go for it. Well, as I explained early on, there's a lot of stuff that we all share, everybody that's part of the general human condition, little people, big people, grown women, grown men, human beings. Thank you all very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.